It's a Wednesday before a race weekend. The pit lane is being set up at Monza. The cars are getting revved and ready to go, and we're exactly the same. But there's plenty of news to get into, and for once, we're not talking about the Formula One drivers' merry-go-round as we have been doing all week. So let's get into our preview to Monza and look at action ahead in 2022 as well this Wednesday here at GPFans. But before we go any further, just hit that subscribe button down below to stay up to date with everything that we do here at the channel. Now, let's dive into the headlines. Let's start first with action on track coming up this weekend, as Max Verstappen believes Mercedes' top speed at Monza could give Lewis Hamilton the edge throughout this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. Mercedes has a strong record at the circuit, as you'd expect, winning the first 5 races of the current turbo hybrid era, and then finishing 2-3 in 2019 at a time when Ferrari's power unit was dominant before doubts were cast later that season. Last year, an array of incidents and a penalty for Hamilton denied the 7-time champion yet another victory. In contrast, Verstappen has never finished higher than 5th at this circuit, and it's proven to be a bogey one for the Red Bull driver, who goes into Sunday's race with a 3-point advantage over Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship standings. Despite dominating his home Grand Prix at Zandvoort at the weekend, Verstappen said, "I expect Monza to suit Mercedes, as it hasn't been our best track for the last few years, but this year we are more competitive, so you never know. If we continue what we have been doing, working well together as a team and nail every little detail, then we can be competitive, but Mercedes might have a top speed advantage on us." Verstappen, unlike his title rival Lewis Hamilton, doesn't feel there is still much to separate the two main constructors in the title fight, and expects racing to be close in Italy as it was at the Dutch Grand Prix. "I don't think either us or Mercedes have a big advantage over the other," added Verstappen. "At Zandvoort, you could see in qualifying and the race that both our cars are super close, and Lewis was applying pressure for the entire race. That meant we couldn't afford to make any mistakes on track, in the pit lane or on the pit wall, and we didn't. I think it's the finer details where you can make a difference. When you enter a race weekend, you have to work hard as a team on the setup and fine-tuning the little details. That's where the gains can be made." Looking at a topic that we actually discussed on the GPFans Stewards Room podcast this week, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff is once again discussing the idea of F1 teams being allowed a third car on the grid to give young talent an opportunity to get out on track, rather than having them sat waiting in the wings of the sport. Over the years, teams have introduced or expanded their young driver programs, but with only 20 seats available on an F1 grid, it means many are never afforded the opportunity they perhaps deserve, other than the odd first practice outing. There has long been talk of Volkswagen Group entering Formula One, either under the guise of Audi or Porsche brands, but that only seems likely from 2025, when the new engine regulations are introduced and they are in line with VW's policies. A more instant resolution would be to expand the grid by the teams currently in the sport, if they wanted to, that is, by entering a third car into the mix, although that would have an impact on team budgets, although concessions could potentially be made. Addressing the topic that there are too many young drivers and not enough seats, Wolff said, "I think we need to make sure talented young drivers have the possibility to come up. What I was always in favour of was not only the mandatory FP1 sessions, but adding a race or two, where those young drivers or those rookies need to race, and actually being part of, for example, the Constructors' Championship. Even more radically, if financially it can be accommodated, having a third car with a mandatory rookie driver. Suddenly we have a grid of 30 cars, and the smaller teams can finance those seats with funding from the drivers or sponsors. That could be very exciting." Interestingly enough, Red Bull team principal Christian Horner feels Formula One is probably missing a team or two, although that brings its own problems in that Formula One's revenues to the teams per year would be reduced due to increased numbers. But, like Wolff, however, Horner is not adverse to the idea of a third car. There are a plethora of young guys in Formula 2, that deserve an opportunity, and there are just not the seats to go around at the moment, said Horner. So you are waiting for a Kimi Raikkonen to retire to open up a seat for a youngster somewhere down the chain to come in. With the budget cap, from what I understand, pretty much every single team is on that limit next year. That's a positive outcome because there are drivers with significant budgets who are not getting seats because teams are able to operate independently at those cap levels. So that shows it's working, it's doing its job. Of course, you have got that age-old problem that as soon as you start dividing up the pie among more members, it gets diluted, and so there is going to be reticence to do that. Hence the topic of a third car. But ultimately, we need between 2 and 4 more cars on the grid to enable young talent to have the opportunity to show its colours in Formula 1. And finally, as we move into Monza and the end of a thrilling triple header to start Formula 1 after the summer break, McLaren team principal Andreas Seidl has called on F1 to completely avoid triple header race weekends for the 2022 schedule. In the coming week, a draft of next year's calendar is due to be released, with Formula 1 once again looking to provide its fans with the record-breaking 23 race calendar. But the McLaren team boss has called on Formula 1 CEO Stefano Domenicali to avoid the idea of triple header races and consider the welfare of team staff. The most important thing from my point of view is that we don't further increase the number of races per year, because I think what we have in place now is already too much in terms of the burden that we put on our people, said Seidl. Another very important topic is also the number of triple headers. From my point of view, we should avoid them completely, again to reduce the burden on our people. We should try to get through with avoiding any triple headers, to be honest. The McLaren man has also stressed how important grouping racing into specific regions over a period of the season was to both teams' movement throughout the year, but also to reduce Formula 1's carbon footprint. It is obviously very important for us, but I know for F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali as well, it is very important, added Seidl. He has put up an agenda for what he wants to achieve with Formula 1 until 2030, and a huge part of that is also the logistics side of things. We know from Stefano he is looking into this, and we need to see simply now how the first draft will reflect that once we get it. So the 2022 season continues to create headlines before it's even started, but what do you think of Formula 1 losing these triple headers? Is it too much of a headache for rescheduling the calendar when things go wrong because of either the COVID-19 pandemic or races like Spa that have to be pretty much called off? Although I guess it's technically still a race from Spa. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. They are great for fans just to have 3 back-to-back weekends of on-track action. And who do you think has the advantage? Is Max right to be worried about Mercedes' increased top speed going into Monza this weekend? We'll be previewing the Italian Grand Prix throughout the next few days here at GPFans, so hit that subscribe button down below to stay up to date with everything that we do, and get onto @GPFansGlobal on Twitter and Instagram to stay abreast of everything that we produce across all our platforms.